Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my FXmovies.20 channel? Thank you so much. My name is Myrtle Truo. I am currently 18 years old. However, the narrative I am trying to convey resembles that of another individual. It is disordered, complex, and unfamiliar. I believed I would have to endure that. I was raised in a household that appeared flawless externally. Mother Caroline possessed an extraordinary career, a prestigious position that garnered universal admiration. Those in her vicinity respected and admired her. She was the archetype of a woman referred to as an inspiration. Yet concealed from public view, she was perpetually occupied, absent, and upon her return home, it was not solely about work. I perceived an inability to establish a connection. Maybe she was with me, or perhaps she was unwilling to be. I do not want to imply otherwise. I adored her, I continue to. However, love does not invariably signify comprehending the experience of maturation. Evenings I spent in my chamber contemplating whether she observed my profound loneliness. And subsequently there was Greg, my stepfather. He arrived in our life when I was approximately 13 years old. Initially, I harbored uncertainty regarding him. He was not similar to my mother, who was astute and resolute. He was affable and amiable. He would make humorous remarks and engage with me as if I were significant. For a period, I believed he was the adhesive that united us. I wish I could articulate that everything remained uncomplicated since I was merely a teenager navigating typical adolescent challenges. However, it did not transpire as anticipated. Upon reflection, I am uncertain of the specific time circumstances began to evolve. Perhaps it was the evenings when Mother was employed till late, and Greg and I would ultimately watch television together. Or perhaps it was the manner in which he would gaze at me, occasionally as if I were no longer a child. My knowledge is limited to the fact that something transitioned gradually and silently. Yet this is not the type of narrative you disclose sparingly. It is not something you simply confide in a pal at coffee or share a laugh. Several years later, it remains burdensome and substantially unpleasant. However, it remains my reality. If I acquired a singular insight from this experience, it is that concealing the truth is ineffective. Initiate its operation. I am uncertain whether sharing this will be beneficial, assist me in attaining closure, or determine if it will only render me more vulnerable. Yet I am aware that narratives akin to mine occur with greater frequency than anyone likes to acknowledge. And perhaps, simply perhaps, someone will heed this and experience a slight reduction in their burden. During my upbringing, my mother consistently appeared as though she were racing against time. Meetings, deadlines, and phone calls consumed her days even when she was at home. It felt as though she were in another place completely. If she were not positioned behind her laptop, she was conversing on the phone while traveling, raising the home and issuing rapid directives. The dinner is in the refrigerator. Remember to secure the door. Good night, Myrtle. However, there was an absence of warmth and no enduring moments where she would pause, regard me, and simply exist. I reassured myself that it was customary. All mothers exhibited similar behavior. What I intend to convey is that she was adequately providing for us, maintaining a shelter, and ensuring I had what I required. However, even in my childhood, I was aware something was absent. I was simply unaware how to articulate it or to whom it should be conveyed. The point at which Greg entered, following Mom's marriage to him, was akin to a light being activated in our residence. He possessed a unique manner of creating an atmosphere where everything appeared simpler, as if life did not have to maintain a serious demeanor. He consistently took a seat and engaged in conversation with me in a manner that was notably elevated, not solely concerning academics or household tasks, but on the novels I enjoyed reading. This indicated I was viewing content that influenced me. It was enjoyable. It exceeded mere enjoyment. For the first time in years, I experienced a sense that someone within the residence observed me. The amusing aspect is that I was unaware of the extent of my need for this. It was only realized upon its acquisition. Greg occupied a void I was unaware existed. Although the concept of filling is pertinent, a gap of that nature is both challenging and simple to obscure the mind for the purpose of obtaining indulgences. Initially perplexed, it was minor details. The manner in which he would smile at me when I recounted a narrative, as if he were captivated by each utterance throughout the entire journey. He would observe if I appeared distressed, Even in my silence, he exhibited attentiveness, thoughtfulness, and charm. I experienced a sense of well-being, excessively so perhaps. There was a particular night that stands out. Mother was working late once more, and only Greg and I were at home. He prepared a straightforward meal such as pasta. We were seated at the table, and I recollect informing him about a confrontation I had with a friend at school. I was exasperated and on the brink of tears, and he merely listened, not in that manner adults occasionally do, where they perform only partially. He was truly attentive. Upon my completion, he listened and thereafter approached across the table and placed his hand on mine. It was a trivial matter, however it appeared immense. He gazed at me and remarked, "Myrtle, you are exceptional. You are aware that you do not permit somebody to induce feelings of inadequacy in you. I cannot ascertain the reason, yet those words resonate profoundly." I exerted excessive effort subsequently. I began to observe the manner in which he would commend me. "You are Myrtle. You possess remarkable intelligence." Observe how he would devise justifications to allocate time spent with me, such as soliciting my assistance with an item. From the household there was nothing explicit. Nothing I could identify and assert that this is incorrect. Yet it was present. There was a shift and I believe we both noticed it. Upon reflection, I contemplate whether circumstances could have been different had I observed it for what it was and halted it prior to its occurrence. It exceeded limits, although at that moment it did not seem perilous. It felt secure, akin to when an individual genuinely. Before I proceed, I wish to express my concern. This narrative is challenging for me to convey, disclosing its unrefined and chaotic nature. There are instances I wish to obliterate. However, if listening to it evokes emotions and alleviates solitude for someone out there, then it is worthwhile. If this resonates with you, please pause for a moment to like, share, or subscribe. It is a minor method to indicate your attentiveness, and this narrative is significant. Thank you. At this moment, a threshold exists at which confusion commences. To experience a gravitational force, it exerts a pull on you, disturbs your sleep, and causes you to question all your choices, including your own emotions. This is where I encountered Greg. I desire the ability to. It struck me unexpectedly out of nowhere and I lacked the time to process it. Despite the assertion to the contrary, it was a gradual and deliberate progression, the manner in which water infiltrates fissures. Preceding you, I began to observe the damage, reminiscent of the time we shared. Not informally, but in a manner that caused my tummy to churn. Upon reflection regarding it subsequently, Greg was not lacking in intelligence. He must have observed. He began to confide in me more, conversing about something that appeared personal, such as how difficult it was to maintain the household, his mother frequently absent, or how isolated he feels. He expressed thoughts I had never previously considered. Adults were previously lonely, but when he stated this, believing him fostered a sense of intimacy between us, as if we were two individuals who comprehended one another in a manner unparalleled by others. Others did, and thereafter there were the minor things. The manner in which he had touched my shoulder as he walked by, or how he would position himself a little nearer than necessary on the couch, devoid of any drama anyone else might observe, but sufficient to raise my pulse as I commenced questioning my own identity. Was I reading excessively, leading to excessive imagination? Was there a genuine aspect to it, or was it merely superficial? Occurring between us at night, I would recline in bed and reminisce. All that occupied my thoughts was the manner of his smile. He laughed at my joke in a manner directed towards me, the way he regarded me as though I were non-existent, merely a child. However, I was an individual who was significant. I despised myself for experiencing that emotion. I despised my inability to attend to it. One day, he requested my assistance in repairing something. There was a leak behind the kitchen sink. An exceedingly trivial matter, yet it experienced a sense of dissimilarity. Our proximity was significant, and I could perceive the strain, despite neither of us speaking a word. Upon his completion, he gazed at me and remarked, "You are quite substantial. Assist Myrtle." I was uncertain of my next course of action. In your absence, it was merely a phrase, a fleeting remark, yet it lingered with me for days. I was unable to cease contemplating it. It was at that moment that the guilt commenced. I saw it was improper. I was aware that I ought not to experience the emotions I was experiencing, however, awareness did not eliminate it. Any action exacerbated the situation I would encounter. I find myself thinking about him, then abruptly returning to reality, disengaged and perceiving myself as the most reprehensible individual. I endeavored to evade him, however, it was never enduring. He was perpetually present, consistently benevolent. Greg began to contemplate whether he experienced the same feelings. Was I only a child infatuated with a crush, or did we share something genuine? I was unaware that I could not know. Yet the absence remained, aware that it was intolerable and I desired to converse with someone, to articulate it vocally. But who could I inform? My friends would not comprehend and my mother was little involved. I retained the picture indoors, feigning that all was well despite feeling as though I was disintegrating. It commenced on an evening that appeared unremarkable aside from the fact that my mother had departed for a business dinner, a networking event that left me solitary at home. It was not uncommon for her to trust Greg, and truthfully, so did I. Greg and I spent the evening together, viewing television, a random film we both partially engaged in. I recall curling up with him on one side of the couch. It appeared customary, even reassuring at the very least. At a certain point in the film, I fidgeted uneasily, adjusting myself. I mumbled something regarding the jeans people perceived as constricting, suggesting that I was gaining weight. It was a casual remark, the kind I created to conceal how I felt self-conscious. When Greg turned to me and stated, "You are not overweight, Myrtle," his tone was serene, nearly beautiful, overwhelmed by tranquility. I was at a loss for words, hence I merely chuckled uncomfortably while attempting to dismiss it. He initially withdrew but subsequently approached, extending his hand gently to rest on my knee momentarily. At that time he stated, "You truly are beautiful." The word beautiful felt profoundly weighty, emanating from him as if it had greater significance, meaning more than it ought to have. I became immobilized, my heart accelerated, and I sensed warmth ascending to my cheeks. I reassured myself that I was merely imagining it, that it was not as it appeared. When he inclined towards me and kissed me, it was not a peck. Rather, it was not a fleeting touch of the lips, like a mistake you would give to someone. It was intentional, measured, purposeful, and I remained stationary. I did not withdraw. I merely remained seated, astonished and uncertain of what transpired. My mind was in turmoil, proclaiming that this was erroneous, yet my body did not. Subsequently, I was unable to cease thinking about it. Upon reflection, I often revisited the moment in my mind, attempting to comprehend what motivated his actions. Was I to blame? I overanalyzed it, which made me feel unwell, accompanied by guilt yet unable to dispel it. Driven by curiosity, I subsequently approached him for solutions to understand the reason for his casual presence in the kitchen, preparing coffee as if nothing had occurred. I inquired about the kiss, desiring him to refute it, to assert that it was an error and that it would not recur. Once more, however, he gazed at me and remarked, "Myrtle, I have had feelings for you for a while. You are the reason for my perseverance." Utilizing your mother, I was astonished by my actions. I had an overwhelming urge to shout and flee anything but remain stationary and listen. I did not require him to justify his actions. I remained motionless once more. He kissed me again. Each time I resisted, I informed him that it was not correct, that it was impossible. However, he persisted. He informed me that I was exceptional, that he was unable to control how he perceived me, his hands upon my shoulders, and I felt ensnared by my waist. It seemed there was no escape. I ought to have executed a greater effort in my struggle, although I did not, and I loathed myself for it. When it concluded, he behaved as though nothing had transpired. He wiped his coffee cup and inquired if I desired any sustenance. It appeared to be an ordinary night, although it was not, it was a typical night for me. I believed I understood trust and familial bonds regarding my personal identity, yet it felt fragmented. The connection continued for approximately 9 months, notwithstanding the rocky circumstances for a significant duration. At one juncture, I was expelled from the residence following an altercation. I have no recollection of the details with my mother. I packed my belongings, though I was uncertain of the details, and departed for a period. I believed that was ultimately for the best. I thought that being outside of the house would place it beyond his reach, that perhaps I could ultimately exhale. I would return to visit on weekends, albeit not for him. I reassured myself each occasion, however, to observe my mother. Even then, I would sense his presence as though he awaited me. Whenever the occasion arose, I would notice him gazing at me during supper, or he would devise some pretext to converse with me privately. It caused my skin to crawl. I despised him, and I loathed myself for additional justification for my actions. Anyone by Christmas that I had relocated during my mother's and my era, we had reconciled, and she received me home as if nothing had transpired. I thought maybe, just maybe, I could move on. I was doing better. I was starting to feel more stable. I was even about to come off my antidepressants and mood stabilizers for the first time in a long while. I felt like I could picture a future place. I wasn't drowning in remorse and confusion. But Greg didn't let go. He didn't understand, or maybe he didn't care that I was done. I assured him. I told him that if he ever touched me again, I'd tell my mom. I thought I'd been clear. I wasn't. He started coming into my room at night, just sat there watching me sleep. Sometimes he'd wake me up, whispering things I didn't want to hear. It was like he was attempting to remind me that he still had control, that no matter how much I wanted to move on, he wouldn't let me. What made it worse was how bold he got. He'd make statements in front of my mom, items that sounded benign on the surface but carried so much weight beneath, and she never noticed. She believed he was talking to her, not me. I don't know if I wanted her to figure it out or if I was frightened she would. Maybe it was both. The relationship finally ended when I started dating someone else. I had been in a relationship with this individual for about 9 months. This time, one that did not induce a sense of nausea within me, caused me to recognize the extent of my error. My experiences with Greg had been overwhelming. I felt as if I could inhale once more, commence assembling the components of myself. I reassembled myself, but Greg did not cease. He, however, discovered methods to interject, inserted himself into my life to remind me of the chaos we had created. And then one day it all collapsed abruptly. My mother discovered that I am uncertain whether she overheard or whether she ultimately perceived what I could not. All I know is that one night, she faced me and the veracity emerged before I could intervene. Everything, the months of concealment, the falsehoods, the remorse I had been a burden on my heart. She spoke little, she merely wept. Subsequently, she contacted the police. Greg was ultimately imprisoned. He attempted to refute it, of course, endeavored to portray himself as someone who misinterpreted the leader. He was exposed and the truth was out. There was no turning back. I believed that would be the case, provide me with some relief, that perhaps I might ultimately be liberated from him. However, it did not seem so. It merely felt like a loss. My boyfriend ended our relationship. He was unable to manage it, did not comprehend what had transpired. I believe he thought I had betrayed him with Greg. I was unable to articulate it too. I refrained from doing so. My friends were divided. Several remained at my side, informing me that it was not my responsibility, that I had been unstable and exploited. Others severed all ties with me. I could not hold them accountable. I was unaware of what to hold a belief about myself. Thus, how could I anticipate that anyone else is aware that I am merely endeavoring to ascertain the path forward? I do not seek sympathy. I am aware of what transpired was abhorrent, and I will bear the burden that will accompany me for the remainder of my life. Nevertheless, I acknowledge that I was youthful and perplexed, exploited by an individual who ought to have understood more comprehensively. I am endeavoring to gain knowledge on how to forgive myself, even in uncertainty. I am fully disclosing everything, not due to a desire for attention, but because I am uncertain about what further actions to take. If you have listened up to this point, thank you very much. I am uncertain about what I seek to discover by distributing this, though perhaps someone may find it useful or may have experienced a comparable situation. Someone possesses guidance about relocation, proceed with instructions on healing. I am attentive. I am attempting to convince myself that it is not excessive, delayed in reconstructing my identity. If you have reached the conclusion, it holds greater significance for me than I can articulate. Please, if you believe this narrative may be beneficial, let another individual disseminate it. And if you desire to accompany me as I ascertain what the next steps are, such as subscribing, your assistance is invaluable at this moment, beyond what I can articulate. Thank you.